Hello, this is Kim here from KimKnightHealth.com and the EmotionalAlchemyAcademy.com. And this is a bit of an experiment. I'm using a new software app for live streaming, so let's see if it works. What I want to do today is to talk about brain fog. Now, this is a big issue for a lot of people, and it is a very frustrating issue to deal with. So I want to talk about some of the not so well-known causes of brain fog. Some of them you may know, some of them you may not. But I want to talk about some of these causes, and therefore that immediately directs to, well, what is the solution? Because if we know what is causing a problem, then we can fix it. So if your car breaks down and you don't know why it's broken down, but you take it to the mechanic, as soon as they isolate the problem, they know what tools to use to fix it, they know what spare part to order, and everything can be done relatively quickly. But if they just tinker away and look at your car and they say, well, I don't know what's causing the problem, then they can't fix it. So one of the most important things is to know what is causing a problem in order to fix it. Now, to start with, just a medical disclaimer. I do not treat, cure, or heal or diagnose any symptoms or illness. It's very important to say that. But what I do is I help people who either have a diagnosed condition and they're not getting results, or they don't have a diagnosed condition and they don't know what's going on. I help these people to actually understand what is really going on, because what I do is root cause analysis, getting to the root cause of the problem. And then I show people what they can do to reverse the problem themselves. So this is handing back the power to you to have control over your health. And that's what really excites me. And that is what we need in our society today. People are relying very heavily on going to the doctor, on medication, and of course there is a place for that, but we need to change things. We need to take back control over our health, and the reality is our body is an incredible self-healing mechanism, and it can reverse a whole variety and multitude of symptoms if we understand what is causing the problem. So the first thing that we need to take into account when we're looking at any health problem is to remember that we're not just a physical body. Now, that may seem a crazy thing to say, and maybe a very obvious thing to say, but the reality is a lot of people are only looking at the physical cause of a problem. In other words, they're not taking a holistic approach where they're looking at the mind, the emotions, the energy, the spirit, as well as the physical body. So I like to chunk a human being up into these 5 core components. We have our mind, which is all our thoughts, our memories, our conditioning, our patterning, everything that is to do with our mind. We have our emotions, everything to do with how we feel. We have our energy levels, which in Eastern medicine is called chi, and in Indian medicine, Ayurvedic medicine is called prana. We have chi, and again, this is not something that is taught in Western medicine. We have the spiritual aspect of ourselves, and that will be different and individual for each person. And we have our physical body. Now, whatever happens on any one of those levels simultaneously affects every other level. In other words, you can't have a thought or a feeling without that changing your body chemistry in some way. It's simply impossible. So when we're looking at any illness and wanting to get results, we've got to take into account all these levels of our being. So let me start with a definition of brain fog. Now, if you've experienced or you're experiencing brain fog, then you probably know what it is and what it feels like and what the symptoms are. If you haven't experienced it, or maybe you've got it slightly and you haven't actually realized that you've got it, this is useful to know. So on Wikipedia, they say that brain fog is the clouding of consciousness, also known as brain fog or mental fog, a term used in medicine denoting an abnormality in the regulation of the overall level of consciousness that is mild and less severe than a delirium. The sufferer experiences a subjective sensation of mental clouding described as feeling foggy. And on WebMD, they say brain fog isn't a medical condition. It's a term used for certain symptoms that can affect your ability to think. You may feel confused or diagnosed or find it hard to focus or put your thoughts into words. So there are many definitions of brain fog, but basically, if we were to put it in a nutshell, we just can't think clearly. It's like we can't get our mind to work like it normally would. And that is obviously really frustrating because, for a start, it really affects our productivity. It affects our ability to complete our tasks and to do normal everyday things. It also comes along with memory loss and forgetfulness and absent-mindedness. There are many different moving elements to brain fog. So what I want to do in this little live stream is to share some of the causes so that maybe you may not have thought of these causes. And that may give you some insights into, okay, well, I hadn't thought of that, and maybe I need to consider that. And then also it will help you to get some solutions. So, first of all, if we have too much on our plate and we're going into overwhelm and confusion because we've just got simply too much on our plate, our neocortex goes into the fight, flight, freeze response and starts to shut down. And that is because at a deeper level, our body thinks it's in danger, and it diverts brain to the brainstem, and we lose our ability to have clear cognitive function. Now, that is a result of if we're doing too much and overdoing it, and we're stressed out, and we're maybe not living a healthy lifestyle, and we're working too hard, and we're pushing ourselves too hard, and we're expecting too much of ourselves, etc., etc. So obviously, if the cause is because we have too much stress in our life and we have too much on our plate and we're not taking care of ourselves and we have poor work-life balance, then the solution is going to be to take better care of ourselves. We need to step back and reassess what is going on in my life, what changes do I need to make, how can I take better care of myself, and that requires some assessment and some changes. So, it's really common that if we're overloaded and overwhelmed, we're going to experience brain fog. Another one is lack of sleep. If we don't sleep enough, we're going to bed too late, we're overriding our natural body indication of when we need to go to bed. Maybe we're staying up late and working, or we're watching TV, using digital devices, which overstimulates the nervous system before we go to bed. If we're not, having a good sleep rhythm, and we're not sleeping well when we actually do go to bed and we wake up unrested, then of course that is going to cause our body not to be able to function properly, and that will affect our mental health and our mental cognition. So again, if we have poor sleep routines, then we need to change our sleep routine. I remember years ago being told when I was getting well from chronic fatigue, and I had to look at all these different lifestyle behaviors in order to make the changes that I needed to make in order to bring my body back to its natural state of health. Because it's about taking away what is doing the harm, taking away what is doing the damage, because we're constantly and ongoingly unconsciously damaging ourselves and harming ourselves, and then we wonder why our body creates symptoms. So remember, the body never creates symptoms without a reason. There's always a reason, because the body is far too intelligent to make mistakes. So it's our job to know, well, what are the habits and the behaviors I have that are healthy, and what are the habits and the behaviors I have that are unhealthy, and what do I need to change? This is not about somebody else doing something. It's about us making the necessary changes. So if we have poor sleep habits, then we need to reassess those. So another one is that brain fog is very often associated with other conditions. In other words, it goes along with other diagnosed conditions. So some of these conditions include, for example, anemia. Sorry, I've just lost my stream for a moment. Yeah, anemia, depression, diabetes, Sjogren's syndrome, migraines, Alzheimer's disease, hypothyroidism, autoimmune diseases such as lupus, arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and from my own clinical practice, some of the main conditions that always show up with brain fog are chronic fatigue syndrome, post-viral fatigue syndrome, Epstein-Barr virus, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome. All these health conditions, and especially these syndromes, one of the symptoms will be brain fog. So it's just good to know that that there are these groups of symptoms that go together. And remember, and I go into this in depth in my What If series, which is a free program that you can get from my website, where we don't treat a health condition to heal somebody, we treat the person. So we don't heal a health condition, we heal a person, and we heal the whole life. Because whatever symptoms turn up, and people can have a long list of symptoms, they're all interrelated. Now, this is one of the problems in traditional medicine or conventional medicine, is that when you go to the hospital, they have different departments. They'll have the brain department and the back department and this department and that department. But the problem is we can't separate anything inside our body, and all symptoms are interrelated. And it doesn't matter, that includes any symptoms that are going on right now, at one point in time or a point in time in the past, whatever those symptoms were. And it also includes, say, for example, you have a certain set of symptoms when you were 20, and then you have some new symptoms when you were 25, and then you have some different symptoms when you were 35. There's always a connection between what is happening. And this is why we have to look at a whole person's life in order to truly heal at a truly holistic level. And that is what I do when I work with people. We do a complete case history of their complete whole life, and we look at how all the dots interconnect to how one symptom led to another symptom, which was really how one event in their life which created those symptoms led to another event in their life which created more symptoms. So it's really about the events in our life and how we respond to those events, which is creating the symptoms. So this is what we do when we do root cause analysis. So next one, if we're going through a shift of consciousness, in other words, our consciousness is expanding, and we are, maybe doing some personal development work, and we're changing ourselves from the inside out, we're changing our beliefs, we're changing our behaviors, we're doing a lot of inner work. What happens is our consciousness literally starts to change and transform. And we can call this evolution of consciousness. And when we go through a shift of consciousness, or another technical term is going beyond a ring past knot, and I'm not going to go into more details about that now, but it just means we're having an expansion of consciousness as we evolve our consciousness. What happens is we can actually feel quite confused for a period of time, because it's like we've left one part of the shore of a river, and we're in a boat going across the river to the other side of the river, but we don't quite know when we're going to get there, and it's all a little bit rough in the middle. So it's very typical when we're going through a shift and transformation of consciousness to have confusion and to not really understand everything that is going on. And this also typically happens when, for example, we have something like a nervous breakdown, which I always call a nervous breakthrough, because often it is a transformation of consciousness. Now, this can be quite a scary thing to navigate if we don't know it's actually happening. And one of my favorite sayings from one of my first teachers was, confusion is the price of awareness. Now, when I'm working with clients and I spot that this may be happening, and I suggest that it maybe is happening, it's a huge relief for people to understand that there's not something wrong. It's just a transformation literally going on in their consciousness, which is going to be literally affecting the brain, the neural pathways in the brain. And that's why it feels so strange, because there is a transformation of consciousness going on inside on all levels. So remember, everything that happens to us inside us, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, energetically, if something is happening on one level, it's going to affect every other level simultaneously. So the next one I want to talk about is gut dysbiosis. So this means the microbiome of the gut are out of balance. Now, this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue in our world today, unfortunately, and there are many reasons for it. We have poorer quality food, we have a lot of herbicides and pesticides, etc. on our food, we have genetically engineered food, the soil is depleted, we have poor work lifestyle habits, we're not maybe eating right for our type, and there are many different ways of looking at that. There's the blood type diet, but then there's the Chinese way of looking at it in terms of, are you eating the right temperature food? And I don't mean is it literally hot or cold. I mean, are you eating, lettuce, for example, which has a cold temperature, which is actually for somebody who needs more warm foods, not healthy for their system, not helping them have healthy digestion. So this is a big area, and it's not my speciality. I'm not a naturopath or a nutritionalist or a gut specialist, but what I do know is if our gut microbiome are out of balance, it has an effect on our brain because of what is called the blood-brain barrier. So we need to really look at this and question, do I have gut dysbiosis, which means out of balance gut, and maybe, get that checked out and maybe change your diet accordingly. So you need to go and see, either a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath or somebody who specializes in that. Another thing which I've heard that can make a difference and cause brain fog is heavy metals. So if we have heavy metal toxicity in our body, such as maybe mercury fillings, or maybe eating foods which have mercury in them, then apparently, again, I'm not an expert on this, you might want to look up Dr. McCullough for this, he talks a lot about this, then that can contribute to brain fog. Another thing that people often forget is that if we take medication, just about all medication has some sort of an effect or side effect, and that can potentially cause brain fog. So I haven't taken a huge amount of medication in my life, but I do remember when I was in hospital with clinical depression and they wanted to give me antidepressants. And it was the only time that I actually started to take antidepressants. I only did it for 3 days. And the reason for that was as soon as I started taking the antidepressants, I noticed that I had even more brain fog. And I just felt worse. Now, this was just my personal experience, and I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't take antidepressants, because I think there's a reason for everything, and it is absolutely not my place to make recommendations in this topic. But what I can share from my experience was that when I took medication, it had an effect on my cognitive function. So we need to bear that in mind, and you might, if you're taking medications and you have brain fog and you haven't thought about this, then you might want to consider it. The next one is menopause. So this is something that I'm personally going through right now, and I can personally attest to having brain fog symptoms as a result of menopause. So again, this might be something to consider if you haven't considered it and you're going through menopause and you're finding that your brain isn't working like it used to. Now, I'm not an expert on this topic because I'm only going through it myself. However, you know, it's just good to know and good to consider, because then you don't beat yourself up and get so frustrated over the fact that your brain isn't working like it used to. And what we have to remember is that our body is a supremely intelligent piece of machinery, although machinery is really not giving it justice. And if we're going through these changes of life, then there's a reason for it, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that we have to navigate through and adapt ourselves to and do our best to manage. And there are many ways and many things that we can do to actually improve all these situations. So, for example, I use Qigong, and my practice of Qigong really helps me to keep my body, my mind, my emotions in balance. So we have to find what works for us. Now, another one that a lot of people may not realize, but it's actually quite a powerful contributor and creator of brain fog, is Wi-Fi. In other words, Wi-Fi routers, cell phone radiation, that sort of thing. So I want to share a personal story that happened to me that really demonstrated to me without doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the effects of Wi-Fi. So some years ago, when Wi-Fi routers were just coming in, I bought a router and I turned it on, and I'd had it on for about 6 months. And I'd noticed over a period of time that my cognitive function seemed to be declining, and I couldn't make decisions, and I just couldn't seem to do my work properly, and I was just finding it really difficult to sit down at my desk and do my work. And to cut a long story short, I have a longer story of this on my website, but to cut a long story short, I turned off the router as an experiment, because somebody told me that Wi-Fi routers and Wi-Fi radiation can give you brain fog. And immediately, within 3 seconds, my brain was clear. I switched the router back on and my brain went foggy again. I switched it off and it was clear again. Now, I had not expected to experience that at all. I had thought that maybe if I turn the router off, I'll feel better in a couple of weeks. But literally, it was in seconds. So from that moment on, I decided, right, I'm not having Wi-Fi in my office anymore, and I will cable through Ethernet. And I also started to notice, because Wi-Fi this is like about 10 years ago, Wi-Fi was just, starting to get more and more common in, public places and hotels and that sort of thing. And I started to notice that if I went to hotels and places where if I checked on my phone, it said, 10 hotspots, around me are available, I really started to notice the effect on my cognitive function and how I would start to get headaches. And time again, I really experienced the very real effects of Wi-Fi radiation. So I really encourage you to check that out. Now, the thing with Wi-Fi radiation is, and what is called EMF, or electromagnetic frequencies, or EMR, electromagnetic radiation, is that there are 2 types. And again, I've got this on a new website, and I'll put the link on this afterwards. It's all about geopathic stress. There are 2 types of EMF radiation. There's man-made, which is anything that man has made. So that will include, airports, body scanners, electronic or EM equipment in hospitals, electric cars, fridges, electrical equipment, cell phone towers, anything that man has made. And then there is natural geopathic stress, which are things like ley lines and underground waterways, which are they happen naturally in nature, but they have an effect on the human electromagnetic field because they're distorting our electromagnetic field. So when I moved into a house, I didn't know that there was an underground waterway underneath. And over a period of time, again, I noticed there was something going on, with my cognitive function, and I wasn't able to concentrate. And I'm going to do some other videos just on my experiences with geopathic stress, because I've had several experiences which have shown the effects of geopathic stress on cognitive function. But anyway, again, to cut a long story short, I had an expert come and dowse, and he discovered that there was an underground waterway under the house, and that was why I had this cognitive dissonance. And as soon as he rectified it using a magnetic coil, my clarity came back. So it's really, really important to consider this. If you have brain fog, you need to check everything in your house, and there's a whole multitude of things that need to be checked. You know, where the electric power sockets are, you know, is your TV, you know, too close to your head, you know, even if it's in the other room. There are just so many things that we need to check for EMF radiation, but really important to consider. And the last one that I wanted to add is that, you know, without creating any drama, is that obviously, you know, there may be something physiological going on in our brain that we don't know about, and we need to get checked up. So that is just purely a physical thing going on that is creating, you know, effects in our brain. So I hope this has been useful to maybe give you, you know, one idea or more if you are experiencing brain fog as to what it might be. Maybe you haven't considered it. Maybe it's something that you might want to consider. If you know anyone with brain fog, then you can share this too, give them some ideas, and I will put the website links that I've mentioned in the replay, and look forward to seeing you in another live stream.